Hi, I'm Bill Carmody, and I'm the Marketing Whisperer. And today on the program, we have Michael Hyatt, who just published a book called Your Best Year Ever. Hey, Michael, how are you?
Good, Bill. How you doing?
Why don't you show everybody a copy of that book?
Here it is, right here.
Just released. That's amazing. That's awesome. So
Been out a
tell,
few days.
so tell me about this. So what is going to make it the best year ever for people as they are sort of thinking out their 2018 and kicking off their year?
Well, I think people basically have two choices. They can either drift through this next year and probably repeat the same kind of year they've had every year for the last 10 years, or they can be intentional and design their year. And that's the cool thing about goal setting is that it gives us the opportunity to design kind of our future and to be able to craft it in a way that we can get to December 31st, 2018, look back on this year and go, wow, that was an amazing year.
I think that's a great insight. Most people are the sort of circumstantial, right? They're sort of looking at what happens to them and they're reacting. They're looking at their inbox and they're reacting to the emails in their inbox or events that happen in their lives. But what you really look at is if you design your own life, you can take control of the outcomes you want to see by the end of the year.
Absolutely, totally. Because the truth is, nobody ever drifts to a destination they would have chosen. And it's much better to design what you want in every area of your life, whether it's your finances or your career or even your most important relationships and your health.
Now, can you explain some of these, the delusional zone, the comfort zone? You sort of talk about these different areas in your book. You sort of bring that and highlight that for our audience here today?
Sure. So one of the things that the research shows, and by the way, we've had 30,000 people go through the online course that came before the book. So we've got a big research base. But all the research shows that when people set a goal in the comfort zone, they're less likely to achieve it because it doesn't ignite your imagination. It doesn't compel your best thinking. It doesn't really get you excited to go the distance and actually persevere through the challenges that you're going to face. So the goal needs to be not in your comfort zone, but in your discomfort zone. So this would be where you're uncomfortable. You're feeling a little bit of fear, you might fail, uncertainty, the path is not clear, or a little bit of doubt. You're not quite sure that you can pull this off. If that's where you're at, that's perfect. That's a discomfort zone, right where your goal should be set. But it's not the delusional zone. And so the delusional zone is where it's, a notch or two beyond that, where you're terrified, you're confused, you're confident or concerned that you can't do it. You want to dial it back a little bit from there. But in the risky zone, in the discomfort zone is where you want it.
I got to tell you, I literally just experienced this book would have been perfect for me last year. I decided that I was going to go do my very first Ironman. And of course, 140.6 miles, that would almost feel like most people, the delusional zone. But for me, it was just my discomfort. And I said, you know what? I've got to do this. This is something I'm going to do. So I hired a coach, Siri Lindley, one of the best in the world, brought them together, and we basically put together an entire strategy to get it done. And over the course of the 5-6 months of training, I was ready for it and actually finished in my top 50%. But to your point, it was outside of the comfort zone. Certainly, it was the hardest thing I've ever done physically, but it wasn't delusional because I didn't just sort of show up for the race the day of and hope for the best,
That's right. But I'll bet that it did ignite your imagination. You were super excited about achieving it, and it had your attention because you knew you had to train if you're going to have a hope of actually making it.
Exactly right. And not only that, I was getting up between 3:30 and 4 o'clock every morning, which was definitely outside my comfort zone, right? I would have loved to slept in until 6 or 7, and instead, you're doing a couple, 2-3 hours of a workout every day, and that sort of continues to challenge me. But every day I woke up, I thought, I'm doing this for a purpose. I'm not just doing it to go to the gym. See, that's what I think when most people fail at their New Year's resolutions, it's this idea of, oh yeah, I should, as opposed to I must.
Right. Well, this is the difference really between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. For our goals to really be successful, particularly big goals, we got to be motivated internally. It's not going to come because our culture expects it or our wife or our husband expects it or somebody's putting pressure on us at work. We've got to find our own reasons. And that's why in the fourth part of the book, I talk about find your why.
Yes.
People lose their way when they lose sight of their why, when they're not connected to a big reason of what is at stake, whether they do it or what's at stake if they don't do it. The more you can stay connected to that, the more you can make it through what I call the messy middle and actually finish what you started.
Well, and let's talk about that for a second because for the Inc. audience, I know a lot of entrepreneurs really struggle with this. The art of the start doesn't tend to be the place where most entrepreneurs struggle. You've got a lot of new businesses
Right.
starting every year, but a lot of them are failing every year too because they get to the really hard, difficult, messy middle and they just give up. So talk to them about like, what do you do? What are the strategies to take you through that messy middle and get to the other side?
Well, there's a couple things. One is make sure that when you set your goal, you've really connected to the why, that you've got a why that can power you through the midst of that messy middle. So I've run a lot of races too, never an Ironman, but I remember the first half marathon I ran. Man, I'd only trained up to about 9 miles, but I was with 35,000 people.
Yes.
I was super excited, euphoric. I thought this is going to be a piece of cake.
Yeah.
Then we got to about mile 9. And then you're just like, what was I thinking? I'm not sure I've got the energy to go the distance, but I've got so much invested, I don't want to quit. So for me, I was actually running for a charity to raise money for a charity that really mattered to me.
Yeah.
And I reconnected with that why. And I thought, if I don't finish this race, there's a whole lot of kids' education is at stake. Plus, I was leading a big team. I was the CEO of a publishing company, and I had 60 people running with me, and I didn't want to let them down. So for me, it was reconnecting with that why that got me through it. Entrepreneurs have to do the same thing. Just starting a business is not a big enough why. Maybe it's because you want more freedom. Maybe it's because you want more margin, more ability to provide for your family, more freedom to invest in the charities that matter to you. Whatever it is, you've got to get crystal clear on that. If you don't, you're going to lose your way. I'd say another thing too. This is for the last part of the book, where I talk about how you take on big challenges. There's a lot of conventional wisdom out there that says, eat that frog.
Yes.
You want to take on the biggest, hairiest, gnarliest thing first, because then it's downhill from there. That's like for somebody that hasn't worked out, walking into a gym, walking over to the bench press, put a couple 100 pounds on and just say, yeah, just press that because it's downhill from here. That's not going to work. So you got to warm up. So I recommend, and this is in the 5th part of the book, where I recommend people start with the easiest task first, then the next easiest task. Now you're getting a sense of momentum, sense of forward progress, and it builds your confidence. And one of the most important things in accomplishing any goal is believing that you can. And your confidence is critical.
I have to echo exactly what you're saying about the celebration of those wins as well. Because I think what ends up happening is, as entrepreneurs, we're really hard on ourselves in the sense that the first time something goes wrong, it's like, God, what did I do that wrong? But what we don't do is we don't celebrate the successes. And so I love your strategy because if you can celebrate each small win, it gets us to the finish line. That's amazing. It's great advice.
And it's hard for high achievers because we like to check the stuff on and then we get refocused on the next thing. But celebrating those is so important to building momentum and being willing to tackle bigger things in the future.
So what's the main takeaway that you want people who are reading your book? What do you want them to do once they've actually gotten all this great information? What's that takeaway? Where do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, I want them to see the power of designing their future.
Yeah.
That whether or not 2018 is their best year ever is largely dependent upon them. It's not going to be luck. It's not going to be your boss walking in and handing you a promotion or getting some big order from Walmart or some crazy thing out of the blue. But it's going to be you, first of all, getting clarity on what you want. That's the most important thing. And so I encourage people, you got to write down your goals. That's the chief difference between a resolution and a goal, is that the goal is written. It meets certain criteria, but just writing your goal down based on the best goal research out there increases the likelihood of you achieving the goal by 42%.
Wow.
So, and the thing about writing a goal down, and I love this old adage, I don't even know where it's from, but it says thoughts disentangle themselves, passing over the lips and through pencil tips. So there's something about writing down your goal that forces you to get clarity about it. And once you get clarity, it accelerates your progress.
That's fantastic. And I think this is a great time because I think when people talk about New Year's resolutions and sort of thinking about the context of how they're going to basically kick off their year and get started, a couple weeks in, people are already sort of second guessing themselves and going right back to their old habits.
Totally.
And that's usually because it's like, hey, it's a thought, like I think I'd like to lose 10 pounds this year, or I think I'd like to do a marathon, or I think I'd like to do this part for my business. And what you're saying is by articulating the goal and being very specific about what success looks like and how will I know when I've achieved it, really getting that sort of
Yes.
pulled out, you're going to have a much better chance of understanding what you need to do to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to get definition around it, and good goals that are achievable meet these criteria that I talk about in the third part of the book about designing your future. This isn't rocket science. I've had 30,000 students go through what I do with enormous success, everything from paying down debt to losing weight to launching businesses, writing books, and all the rest. But the goal technology is the same, but it does begin with writing it down. It also, I'll tell you another a big obstacle for a lot of people is getting these limiting beliefs out of their head, out of their way. Because so many people lose the battle hardly before they start because of the way they're thinking. So I've got a process in the first part of the book that talks about identifying and acknowledging those limiting beliefs and then transforming those into liberating truths so that you actually believe you can.
Right.
It's like, I think Ziglar used to say, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Right.
And so how can we get ourselves to the place that authentically we think we can? And that comes from confronting those limiting beliefs and transforming them.
You know, and I think what's fascinating about your description is that it also really helps people to understand that they are in control of their outcomes. And I think the thing about limiting beliefs is that we don't often look at sort of where they come from. You know, they sort of show up based on even things that we did in our childhood, and they stay with us. And then eventually, if we don't stop and look at why do we believe what we believe, you know, we're going to continue to have those limiting beliefs that'll stop us from achieving what we're absolutely capable of achieving. You know?
Totally. I mean, I see this all the time with people that would like to start a business, but they say, I'm too old.
Right.
Or you get somebody else, I've seen at the opposite end of the spectrum, says, I'd like to start a business, but I'm too young. Or I'm too overeducated, or I'm undereducated, or I don't have the right contacts, or I don't know enough people, or I don't have access to the resources. All that stuff is in your head.
Right.
And if you can have a process, which I articulate in the book, of transforming that into a liberating truth, then all of a sudden it empowers you so you can take the actions necessary. I mean, oftentimes the only thing that's the difference maker between a person that takes action and achieves a goal and somebody who sits on the sidelines and doesn't even try is what they believe is possible.
That's true. Which it goes back to some of the earlier advice you gave about going after the smaller goals first, because that's the other part of a limited belief is that if you can show the opposite, if you can demonstrate your capability of basically crushing a small goal, then that reinforces whatever you thought you couldn't do beforehand. You're like, no, I knew that was not true. I'm seeing the truth in what I'm actually achieving, and that continues to propel your momentum and success forward. So that's awesome. I love that approach.
You know, in a business context, the most important, most difficult person you'll ever sell is yourself.
Yes.
If you can convince yourself, if you can sell yourself, you can do unbelievable stuff. But that's where it begins.
So talk to me about your personal mission. Why did you write this book? What are you out to try to accomplish? Like, tell me a little bit more about what it is that really inspired you to write this book and get out there.
Yeah, one of the things that I've loved doing my entire career is developing people. You know, I can see potential in people. I love to see them develop potential, and people are so much more capable than they often give themselves credit for, and sometimes we give them credit for. So I thought, what could we do to try to help people design the life they want so that they're not sitting on the sideline complaining about the life they've got, but they could actually be an active participant in creating the kind of life they want. And it's been incredibly gratifying to see people get what they want out of life. And again, you know, to passively wait for it, you know, probably not going to happen, but you can actively get involved and make it happen. And that's what motivates me. I live for the transformation in other people's lives.
So I love that. And I think that personal transformation support allows people to be their best, most authentic version of themselves. So you talked about limiting beliefs. Is there anything else that just stops us from accomplishing that, from really being our most authentic versions of ourselves?
Yeah, I think one simple one is asking for help.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes we think, and particularly, I don't know if it's a particularly American mindset or it's an entrepreneurial mindset, but we have this, you know, pull it up by our bootstraps kind of thinking that we've got to go it alone, we've got to be the Lone Ranger, we've got to make it happen on our own. The fastest way to get where you want to go is to ask for help. You can go further, faster with coaching than you can ever on your own. But here's what typically happens. You know, somebody knows they need to go to the dentist, So they say, okay, after I've been flossing for 6 months, then I'll go.
Yeah.
Or somebody knows they need a financial advisor, and they say, well, as soon as I get out of debt, I'll go see a financial advisor. I mean, you get the idea.
Yeah.
And if you would just ask for the help, I've been using executive coaches since about 2000, the year 2000, and that's been an enormous reason why I've been successful, because I've had people like a Sherpa, they've been to the top of the mountain, they know the path, they know how to get me there. I don't have to figure it out on my own. So why we don't do that, I don't know, but that's what keeps a lot of people from succeeding. Somebody out there knows how to solve your problem. You do not have to reinvent the wheel.
You know, it's such a great insight, because I think you're exactly right. When people go out there and sort of start a new business, they really do think about the cost of, bootstrapping themselves and sort of like, I need pinching every penny to make sure that I'm successful. And yet, the irony of that is that they're going to make really expensive mistakes because they're basically investing in things they've never done before. Whereas by having an executive coach to support you through that process, they can say, no, don't do that. You're going to waste a lot of money over here for those reasons, because basically they understand the same mistakes you're about to make. They've made it themselves, and it was very costly for them, but you don't have to make it now.
Yeah. And the other thing that happens a lot of times is entrepreneurs get all tied up doing the minutia, stuff that really doesn't advance the business, the stuff that only they can do. I had one of my clients who needed a web developer. Mm-hmm. And he said, so I'm doing it myself. He said, I'm not that great. And so I asked him the question. I said, about how much do you make an hour, rough numbers?
Yeah.
And he said, well, I'm making about $150, $200 an hour. I said, okay. I said, would you pay a web developer $150 to $200 an hour to develop your web or your website? He said, absolutely not. I said, well, actually you are.
Yeah.
And by your own admission, he's not very good.
Yeah.
So the best thing you could do is hire somebody and free up that time so that you could work on the things that drive the revenue and profit of your business. And it was like an aha moment, and it was a complete turnaround for him.
Well, and you're right, because then basically having that time to go do what they do best in the world, they're going to be able to grab more revenue and have somebody else at a lower price point be able to do a much better job, much faster, and get a better result, for all those same reasons. Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely.
I love it. Well, listen, we've covered a lot of ground today. Is there anything we haven't touched on that you want to make sure the audience hears, either about your book or your personal mission, before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I would just say the only thing we really haven't talked about in the book that is important is completing the past.
Okay.
And I think there are a lot of people that drag the worst of their past into the best of their future. And when we do that, we're kind of destined to repeat the future again. So the question I would ask people is, are you going to have the same year that you've had probably for the last 10 years? Or this year, you're going to do something different, take it to another level, and move past the past? And I like the way Tony Robbins says, he says, your past does not equal your future.
Yeah.
And it's really true. And this book really gives you the technology to become the architect of your future. Doesn't mean everything's going to go perfect. Doesn't mean even you have to have total control of the future. But things always go better with a plan than they do trying to wing it and just drifting through life.
Well, so it's interesting, because that whole focus there of being in the present moment and thinking about the future, you don't, when you live in the past, you live in regret. And so no matter what it is, you could have done something better, no question. And at the other extreme with a lot of entrepreneurs, they live so far in the future, they live in anxiousness. They're not sure exactly how to get it done. So what I hear you saying is, by having that strategic plan built, and so you can sort of design your life for this year, you're not so far in the future that you're anxious, and you're not living in the past where you have regret. You're right here in the present, doing what you can do to have the best possible year of your life.
That's absolutely right. Now is the only time we have. It's the only time we can make a change. It's the only time we can make a difference. So we got to take advantage of that, knowing where we're going, with no regrets on the past, but focused on now. What can I do now?
Michael Hyatt, best year ever. I love it. It's a great book. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about it. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it, Michael.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.